There's still a few more gifts that need to be left under the tree by Santa Claus. But Ole Miss fans, you can point to a national championship potential in 2024, and that is perfectly okay. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Also spent a short stint in WSMV in Nashville. Today on the show, Santa may be bringing a 2024 national championship to Ole Miss, and it is okay that Ole Miss fans get hyped up about that. They can absolutely win that title. I'm going to tell you why. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On your first listen every single day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're going to dig into this a little bit because Ole Miss has a legit chance to compete for a national championship, and Ole Miss fans can genuinely dream about that national championship starting right now. And I'm going to tell you why. And it involves talent infusion. It involves the players coming back. It involves all the work that is being done in the transfer portal. And it involves the schedule being about as easy as an SEC schedule can be. We'll talk about that in today's show. But we want to start off with the talent infusion on the roster. If you look at a combination of the players that are being brought in, that is fantastic. But it's the players that are coming back that is the story potentially. You have Jaxson Dart, who is a short list player on Heisman lists going into the 24 season. He's a top 10 level player that is appearing on that and is just a major factor. It's a situation to where he played unbelievably well against A&M and LSU. Ole Miss won those games. It was largely because of how well he played. He did not play as well against Georgia. Ole Miss ended up losing that game. He did not play as well against Alabama. Ole Miss ended up losing that game. The point is, Jaxson Dart going against opponents is a major deal. Now, the talent around him is getting to a different level, but Ole Miss is still going to go as far as Jaxson Dart takes them. And Walker Howard backing him up, that is going to be a big deal as well. It starts with the bowl game in that situation. The best running back potentially in the country is lined up beside Jaxson Dart. Somebody that every team that Ole Miss plays, the number one thing that they're going to want to stop is sitting right beside him or standing right beside him. And Jaxson Dart is going to become a more effective quarterback because of how good Quinshon Judkins is, and vice versa, honestly. Then you look at the wide receiver position, and this is a step up a little bit, where Ole Miss has a chance to have the number one wide receiver room in the country next year. You're going to have Tre Harris, who might be the best wide receiver in the SEC. Honestly, I think he is. Somebody that would argue with you about whether he stands at that level in the SEC is Juice Wells. Ole Miss signed him as well. The number one JUCO wide receiver, Deion Smith, who just go look at his huddle tapes, go look at his huddle highlights. A simple offense, a dynamic player. He even showed up for his signing with Ole Miss in a freaking Lambo. So Deion Smith has all of the confidence. You have Aiden Williams coming back. You have Jordan Watkins, who is Mr. Reliable on this team. Whenever Ole Miss needs a yard, he's going to get the first look. And then you look at the tight end position. Caden Priestcorn coming back, a massively important cog in this Ole Miss offense. You have Hudson Wolf. You have Dylan Hipp. You have Javante Connor coming back. Offensive line, they've added Jerquan Scott. They're going to add other players. I've heard rumors of Percy Lewis, the offensive tackle at Mississippi State. We'll see how that goes. But Ole Miss needs players to be equal level players. They're not looking for starters on the offensive line. There's a lot of people that talk about Ole Miss's offensive line like it's some sort of a major problem. And yes, Georgia kind of get after them, but Georgia kind of gets after a lot of teams. And Ole Miss was playing them without both of their starting tackles, or 2 out of their 3 main playing tackles in that game. The only one that was there is Victor Kern. He's going to graduate, but Jaden Williams and Micah Pettus ended up being out after the first series in that game. And if you recall, that first series, whether it be script or however, Ole Miss kind of went down the field and scored a touchdown when Jaden Williams was in the game early on. So I don't view the offensive line as the deficiency that a lot of people do. There's some people that don't understand exactly what Ole Miss does. It's not pass set. It's not the offensive football that you know about when you're in an RPO scheme. Ole Miss does some split line blocking. They open up the middle from time to time, trying to block, honestly, through deception to where the defender takes himself out of the play. And it's an RPO to where you can hand it off to the running back, or it's a pass play involved. And if it takes a little bit too long, it's going to be hard to hold that in. So I don't put all the blame on the offensive line on that as well. Defensive line, you got Princely Umanmielen. You have Tyler Baron. You have J.J. Pegues. You have Xavion Harris. You have Akello Stone. You have this 4 group of high school defensive linemen of DeCamerion Franklin, Cam Beavers, Jeffrey Rush, and William Eccles. You have the chance for the number 1 defensive line in college football at Ole Miss, and it's going to be reminiscent of Tim Bowens and Norman Hand and the Red Death defense of 1992, to where they're just causing all kind of havoc because of what can happen up front. The biggest beneficiaries of that, the secondary, when they're not going to have to cover as long, and also at linebacker with like Chris Paul and TJ Dudley and Santarin Perkins, and those players that just kind of get to use their athleticism and can kind of flow sideline to sideline and clean up the messes. I think the defensive improvement that Ole Miss is about to make is going to be shocking to some teams. When it's just difficult to move the ball against Ole Miss's defense. They're going to be like, what is going on? If you're looking at the corners, they got some physical guys to line up with. That's something you need to understand. Physical players. They're trying to find somebody that they can man cover, and they're okay doing that. And they got athletes that can handle those man coverage responsibilities. That is going to eliminate some of the hot routes with the pressure that they can expect to get on the quarterback. They're going to eliminate some of those throws as well. So the defense has a chance to be very, very effective year one. Again, not much work potentially for Frazier Messine. And also kicking wise, I think Caden Davis is due back as well. And I think Ole Miss is recruiting a kicker as we speak right now. That is pretty good as well. The talent infusion of this roster and the players that are coming back are such a major component, because this was a 10-win team. This is a team that, if the college football playoff was expanded this year like it was supposed to do, Ole Miss is sitting in with a road game playing, I think, this weekend at Ohio State. That's what it would look like. A year from today, or a year from last Saturday, I should say, Ole Miss could have played a playoff game. We are under a year from the playoff. And Ole Miss has not just a chance for getting the playoff. It's gotten to the point where you hear people talking about Ole Miss, they're locked for the playoff. And, you know, everybody's trying to get their hot takes out early. But this team has a chance to do something really, really special. They're in the discussion for a bye. They're in the discussion for a home playoff game. That is the realm that Ole Miss is living in right now. We'll see. Ole Miss doesn't get Texas. They don't get Alabama. They don't get Missouri. They've got Georgia, which is going to be a good team. That might be the most talented of all of them. They've got at LSU minus Jaden Daniels, who was the problem last year. They're still going to be good. Brian Kelly's a good coach. And they have Oklahoma, whose whole offensive line is just gone at the moment. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. Anyway, should be a lot of fun, really interesting stuff. And I do want to say thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. one after another, seeming players are coming back into the fold. That tells you the mindset. And if you look at what's happening in the transfer portal right now, you see that talent infusion. So we're going to talk about the transfer portal in just a second. But right now, I do want to tell you about the Game Time app. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. The Peach Bowl with Ole Miss and Penn State next Saturday, it's sold out. There's no tickets to buy, so you have to use the secondary market. Well, the Game Time app is a secondary market. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It is easy to find and buy tickets of every kind for every event in your area, with views from all the seats in the arena that you're trying to get to, including Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. They're all in prices, show your total up front so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees, and you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Click, click, you're done. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, you can just pick the section you want to sit in, and Game Time will pick the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you can't find tickets, or if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Kill last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You won't want to miss it. And there's fast channels that is available in the Locked On network as well. I'm pretty fired up about what's happening at Locked On right now. So we talked about the players that are coming back. Let's talk about the players that are being kind of infused, especially through the transfer portal, especially defensively. We'll talk about and touch on Jerquan Scott and Juice Wells. But defensively is where Ole Miss is making their hay at the moment. Princely Umanmielen, Tyler Baron, Tamarion MacDonald, Taz Nicholson, Louis Moore, DeCamerion Richardson, and potentially Walter Nolen. We're still waiting on Walter Nolen. I understand that everybody's getting impatient. A situation he might sign, by the time you're watching this, but my gut tells me is like, hey, this feels like a Christmas Day type announcement. It's gotten to the point where if you know where you're going to go, you might as well wait until Christmas to put it out. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. But defensive line, if you look at those, you're looking at starters from SEC level schools that are coming into the fold for your team. Athletically, size-wise, all of this stuff is going to be an improvement over what Ole Miss had. There was times last year, and everybody knows what I feel about Jared Ivey and how good of a football player he is. There were times when he was playing the 3 technique last year, and they'd move him inside and let that happen. Jared Ivey's 260 pounds. And if the other defensive lineman's a Kello Stone, which I would guarantee that those two played together at some point, you're looking at a defensive line that is on the smallish side. It's going to make linebackers have to work a little more, makes everything a little harder for like Suntarine Perkins, who is not the biggest player in the world. That is important. So Ole Miss needed to bulk up defensively. They needed to become grown men defensively. And what they've done through the transfer portal is completely rebuild their defensive end so far. They've gotten the number 1 and number 2 defensive ends out of the portal in Princely Umanmielen and also Tyler Baron. They are in the thickest of thicks with Walter Nolen, who, if he comes to Ole Miss, makes Ole Miss's defensive line the best in college football. It's going to be a situation where running the ball is going to be a struggle because of Princely Umanmielen, J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolen, Tyler Baron, Jared Ivey, all of those players. Xavion Harris, who is 6'7", 340 pounds, is somebody that you can put in the fold as well. Defensive line-wise, this is going to be different. Then add this 4-star group of top 100 players playing on the defensive line in high school, and you can see they're about to go 12 deep, and they're about to go 12 deep with really good players. So you're going to see a lot of depth on the defensive line, which is something that is rare for Ole Miss fans to see. But you're also going to see extremely talented young players. And those are going to allow Chris Paul to, like I said, scrape. Suntarine Perkins, just go out and be an athlete. TJ Dudley, just play football, making the linebackers more effective because the defensive linemen are going to take up offensive line blocking because they have to. These are game wreckers. These are absolutely game wreckers. It's a pick your poison type situation. And we'll see exactly how that goes as well. Defensive backs are also going to benefit from that defensive line. Whenever the quarterback before had 2.5 seconds he can count on, now you can take that clock down and knock it down to 2 seconds because you have pass rushers on both sides. It's going to be a menace. You have J.J. Pegues who can get after the quarterback, and you've got Walter Nolen who we know can get after the quarterback. And then with Pete Golding and his propensity for blitzing, you can see that offensive line schemes can get in a lot of trouble as it sits. So one of the major features, the reason that you can be so hopeful about a national championship in 2024 and why it's okay to think that and it's okay to go down that road is the strength of what this defensive line could be. Now, wide receivers has a chance to be at the same level. You potentially have 2 position groups that might be the best in college football in 2024. But you also have other position groups because of how good the defensive line is going to be that are going to get better as well. Linebacker and defensive back are going to be really good as well. I'm pretty fired up about what can happen defensive line. There's still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's hard to say an SEC schedule is easy, but we will say it's about as easy as you can get in this league. We'll tell you about that in just a second. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on this action. The app is easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. If you look at the Peach Bowl right now, Penn State's a 3.5-point favorite. The money line's about easy. I mean, it's winning. The winning amount is the same just about who wins, period. It's almost a pick 'em at this point. And the over-under is at 48.5 points. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season today. FanDuel, it's an official partner of the NFL. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. Now, one thing's really interesting to do, and one thing that we need to think about, honestly, is Ole Miss got a break with the schedule. When you look at the schedules, all of the Blue Bloods come back and it's like, oh, that was hard. There's difficult games, but there's really nobody that going into next season can argue that they have a better SEC slate than Ole Miss. Now, it's an interesting situation that starts off real similarly to 2022. You open with like Furman, and then you go to Wake Forest, and I think Middle Tennessee is on there as well. And somebody else is on that list in the non-conference slate. Then Kentucky, South Carolina, and I might get these out of order a little bit, but Then you have like LSU and Oklahoma and at Florida and all of this. And the way it sets up in a way that Ole Miss can make a run. There's two parts of the schedule that are pretty interesting. There's a slate in October that goes LSU, then Oklahoma, in back-to-back weeks. If Ole Miss can make it through those games, they're probably going to be in really good shape and get into potentially the Georgia game undefeated. Georgia game is the game that everybody points to. It's in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. We all know how Saturday night in Athens went this year. This game is not going to go like that. This game is going to be teams that are completely locked in, players that are completely locked in, and they are going to be ready for what's going to come. They've seen it before. They understand it before. And defensively, there's weapons they got. There's personnel additions to make the team a little bit better, get them closer together. Georgia's probably still going to be favored in this game. I do not expect it to go like it did in 2023. Period. And then at Florida, I think Florida at that point could be a tire fire. If you look at Florida's schedule, they have a sure win against Samford, and that pretty much is the end of their sure wins. They play Miami, they play UCF, they play Florida State in the school. So that's their non-con. And then you add Samford, and then they have their SEC slate that has Ole Miss and Texas and Georgia and all of these teams that are pretty good coming on board. And we'll see exactly how they go. I mean, Billy Napier, he's going to have to work a miracle to win 5 games in Gainesville next year, as hard as that schedule is. They should absolutely fire with cause whoever came up with that schedule. And then you have the game in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium at the end of the year against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Not necessarily worried about that game, but the Egg Bowl can always get weird. We understand that. And we understand also that whenever you believe too much that the game can get weird, it's actually the ploy of the underdog. It just kind of is what it is. But that SEC schedule and the way that it sets up for Ole Miss is better than it has, I don't know, in recent memory. Ole Miss had the 6th toughest schedule in the NCAA this year and went 10-2. Now they lost 2 games, and you saw exactly the level you had to go to make your team a little bit better. But they still won 10 games. I think it's important to admit that you won 10 games. And Ole Miss going into those other ones, they're trying to figure out how to get Georgia, who is the team on their schedule next year instead of Georgia and Alabama. It's just Georgia. You need to, at a baseline, set a goal of 11-1. And we're going to do W's and L's come July. But you have a situation to where Ole Miss has a chance to do something unbelievably special. So we talk about national championship in Ole Miss. And everybody, they're probably rolling their eyes when they're listening to me talking about this. But all of Ole Miss's contributors from last season, including the best running back in the country and the best wide receiver in the nation, likely coming back. We haven't heard official word on Jaxson Dart or Quinshon Judkins, but likely they're coming back. We're not just making that up whenever we say that. We're still waiting to hear on Ulysses Bentley and all of the players they've added to those rooms. You have a situation where Aiden Williams, right? Aiden Williams last season, I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game going up against wide receivers that are going to be playing in the league, essentially. And Aiden Williams not only looked in place, he looked like he deserved to be there, but he also was in the top half of what I saw. And he is looking at 5th or 6th in the Ole Miss rotation next year. Him and Caden Lee, they're sitting there probably biding their time, trying to get ready for 2025. And that's fine. But Aiden Williams is a really, really good football player. And if you look at the wide receiver room at Ole Miss, You got Tre Harris, who is potentially the best wide receiver in the SEC and potentially in the country. Because if you're the best in the SEC, there's always that argument. You've got the best running back in the country in Quinshon Judkins. Like I said, offensive line, they need to add. They don't need starters. They need additions. Defensive line, potentially the best in the conference, which would be the best in the country as well. And which is going to make the linebackers play a little bit better. They got the best linebacker out of the transfer portal. And they got some absolute dudes in the secondary. Their physicality is going to go way, way up. And that should make every Ole Miss fan excited. So I'm going to close it out with this, because this is absolutely the case. It is okay for Ole Miss fans to be hyped about a potential national championship in 2024. It is completely cool with that. Understand that the players realize that as well. That is what they're talking about. That is what they understand. Their belief that they can get it done is going to be a major factor for Ole Miss over the course of the next several games. Ole Miss opening up against Furman will be unbelievably interesting. Now, like I said, there's still some presents that Santa needs to drop under the tree. Whether that's Walter Nolen or Percy Lewis or another offensive lineman. We'll see exactly how that goes. But if you look at the skill talent available to Ole Miss, yeah, they're there. They're where they need to be. If you look at the defensive line talent based off the rumors of who's going to be at Ole Miss, yeah, they're there. It's going to be the best defensive line in the country. If you look at the linebackers, Chris Paul, great player. Suntarine Perkins, TJ Dudley. These are all 4- and 5-star football players or SEC all-freshman football players playing linebacker that have the size and the physicality to be a little bit different. If you notice I'm kind of doing the size-speed ratio in a different way. And it's because that is what Lane Kiffin is purposely recruiting toward. It is absolutely open season for Ole Miss to think national championship in 2024. And it's okay for Ole Miss fans to be completely on board with that. Because this team is going to be one of the 5 or 6 most talented teams in the entire country at the beginning of 2024. Absolutely nuts stuff. I'm pretty fired up, as you can imagine. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every dayers, we have all the Peach Bowl and all the recruiting talk that you'll ever need. Check in all week for that. We'll start our normal game week shows with what we learned, keys to the game, and all of that going into the Peach Bowl game next Saturday. For your second listen to Locked On Sports Today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. For those on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Until Monday, hotty toddy.